Episode 56 e.g. May 15, 2023. The fossil fuel power plants, some pollution optional and, when commenting, bring up wood-burning pollution compared to coal-burning pollution issue. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, see rawsepresidents.wordpress.com and scroll down for PDFs of articles with URLs to search on. And on the website are links to 30-minute YouTube videos and Spotify podcasts as well as podcasts on Amazon Music Prime, free for Prime subscribers, podcasts.google.com, Castbox, and Pocket Cast. Pocket Cast is only free on the phone app. Pocket Cast can be played on Apple phones. https://www.eventbrite.com/e/epa-climate-change-and-well-being-us-the-us report-ticket-6220666145587. Issued, May 15, 2023, 1:24 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Register now for the EPA Climate Change and Children's Health and Well-Being in the U.S. Report webinar. On April 25, 2023, EPA announced a new national-scale, multi-sector report that showcases some of the ways children are especially vulnerable to a variety of health effects from climate change due to physical, cognitive, behavioral, and social factors. EPA will host a public webinar on Monday, May 22, 2023, from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. ET to discuss the report. Register now. Participants can submit questions in advance by emailing them to sira@epa.gov. The peer-reviewed report quantifies projected health effects associated with extreme heat, air quality, changing seasons, flooding, and infectious diseases. Where possible, the analyses consider the extent to which health effects disproportionately fall on children who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, low income, without health insurance, and/or have limited English proficiency. To access the report and associated materials, go to the Climate Change and Children's Health and Well-Being in the United States report webpage. For additional information, read the EPA press release. EPA releases report showing health impacts of climate change on children in the United States. Making soil from fallen trees. RAWSEP tip: don't burn fallen trees or tree branches. 1. Have trees and brush picked up by your municipality's brush collection service, with pickup usually done every few weeks in the spring and fall. 2. Or take the trees or branches to a recycling center. Check with your municipality. 3. Or make wood chips to use as mulch. Or 4. Use wood chips in a compost bin along with materials that speed decomposition of wood chips. You will end up with soil usable in your gardening beds. RAWSEP view of making compost from wood chips. One way to avoid burning wood is to make fallen trees into wood chips, which are useful as mulch. But if you are in a wildfire-prone or drought area, you might want to dispose of fallen trees by having them picked up by your municipality's brush removal or make wood chips and then use them in compost bins to create soil from wood. However, to avoid a 3 to 4 year wait if wood chips alone are put in a compost bin, it is best to combine wood chips in a compost bin with green material, or even fresh lawn clippings, food waste, coffee grounds, or manure. Blood meal or feather meal can also speed up the process. If the compost pile is large, you can spread a couple of handfuls of balanced, dry fertilizer evenly over the surface. If you want to put wood chips in compost, the process will work best if the chips are as small as possible, preferably 1 to 2 inches, 2.5 to 5 centimeters, at most. Be patient. Composting wood chips is a long, slow process that can take as long as 3 or 4 years. The larger the chips, the longer the process takes. Yes, you can put wood chips in compost, but composting wood chips isn't as straightforward as a typical backyard compost pile. Some types of wood, including cedar, cypress, oak, redwood, and American mahogany, are especially slow to decompose. Don't compost wood from you or other toxic plants unless you're sure the pile will be hot enough to break down the toxic substances. Otherwise, let the chip sit for a few months before composting it, then let the finished compost sit a few more months before using it. Wood chip mulch is popular because it provides a rich environment for plant growth and retains moisture in the soil. However, one downfall is that this mulch can quickly catch fire. This is because wood chips burn hotter than leaves or grass. United States. What conversation points worked when talking to my north side neighbor about indoor and outdoor residential wood burning? 1. I have 2 years of online data on PM2.5 levels, correlated with Ring camera footage showing emissions coming from a south side residential wood burner stack nearby. 2. I have contacted my health department and my city alder about an ordinance to measure residential wood stove emissions at the fence line of a near neighbor's yards with a purple air monitor. When PM2.5 levels exceed current or future EPA limits on PM2.5 pollution, this data could be used to shut down each residential wood burner, one by one if necessary. 3. I wrote and passed a Wisconsin Conservation Congress, WCC, citizens' resolution to that effect of, point 2, with hundreds of yeah votes in Dane County, Wisconsin in April 2023, saying much the same thing as, point 2. Since I am the sponsor, this resolution needs Wisconsin state legislative action to become law, and the WCC resolution will be considered for sponsorship by my Wisconsin state senator and my Wisconsin state representative. 4. I visited my Wisconsin state senator's 2 aides and my Wisconsin state assembly representative and his aide in April to talk about the health effects on near neighbors of residential wood burning, along with other lung issues, along with representatives of the American Cancer Society on an American Lung Association Legislative Action Day in the Wisconsin State Capitol in April. 5. The north side neighbor I talked to had been given a log splitter and was noisily splitting wood for a week when I decided I should talk to him in a friendly way. We spoke and it was a friendly conversation. He said he would probably not burn the wood he was splitting, and he wondered aloud what he could do with the split wood. I suggested composing it. The ins and outs of composting wood chips into soil usable for gardening was described above. 6. My north side neighbor's friend, the chief neighborhood wood burner who happens to be the wood burner 60 feet away from me, south side, who probably supplied him with the log splitter, told my north side neighbor that he, the south side wood burner, worked for the forestry industry. The north side log splitter implied that his forestry friend knew what he was doing. I reminded my south side neighbor that I am a biochemist and work for the Department of Medicine. I understand the health effects of wood burning on near neighbors, such as lung cancer, asthma, and early death, to name just a few health effects. 7. I said I was 65 years old and wanted a home I could retire to live in peace in. My south side neighbor seemed to find that compelling, the idea of living in peace in your own home. We have been friendly neighbors in the past. 8. I explained that the concept of carbon neutrality is a lie, pushed by politicians but rejected by scientists. Pollution from wood burning is real and wood burning produces more CO2 and PM2.5 than coal burning. I said I testified at EPA hearing in February 2023 on lowering the limits of PM2.5. 9. I pointed to the sign I had on my fence for the last 2 years, giving the email address of the American Lung Association as contact email to use to trade in your wood stove for a credit toward burying a natural gas furnace for home heating. My neighbor said it was hard to read and he didn't understand what it meant. I think he didn't like the sign, and that it troubled him to read the message. I decided to buy another sign which will arrive in a few days, which simply states http://rossipresidents.wordpress.com videos and podcast Spotify, podcasts.google.com, Amazon Music Prime, with the RAWSE Presidents logo, a color picture of a person walking through an avenue of trees. I did not explain what PM2.5 was to my neighbor, so for additional information, I think everything anyone needs to know about PM 2.5 is on the website already. 10. My neighbor pointed out that he had knocked off his chimney a few months ago, and implied that he wouldn't be burning wood indoors, but outdoors, if at all. 11. I said I hope to install solar panels on my roof, but I hesitate because what is the use of investing in clean energy if the air I breathe is polluted and unbreathable and will force me from my home eventually? I said I use 3 air purifiers in the winter when wood smoke infiltrates into my house. I said my nearest neighbor, on the south side, who doesn't burn wood, who lives between me and the south side wood burner, volunteers to clean up the lakes. I want to clean up the air, but for admittedly very personal reasons. I didn't mention that lake cleaning neighbor, next to me on the south side, after moving in only around 6 months ago, had to have her home air ducts cleaned on an emergency basis in January, probably because she is nearest to the 60-foot-away neighborhood, south side, indoor wood burner, and her ducts were clogged or coated with PM 2.5 particulates. 12. I don't know which points I made which really resonated with my north side neighbor, or if anything resonated with him, but our conversation was friendly. 13. What I didn't speak about to my neighbor is that I will be a vendor at the Wisconsin Democratic Party annual convention in June, and a flyer for RAWSE presidents will be inserted into convention folders for around 2,000 Democratic attendees in June 2023. I also decided to get the new sign a few hours after our conversation. The first sign was a little too indirect and subtle. The first sign also referred to replacement of wood stoves with natural gas furnaces. New wood stoves change-out programs now replace residential wood-burning stoves with new heat pumps which work at 40 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. The latest information like that can be found on this RAWSE president's website, so my new sign just refers people to the website, says RAWSE Presidents has videos and podcasts, and lists the names of the major video and podcast sites. 14. I am also in the process of getting technical assistance from the federal government to write grants for handing out PM 2.5 monitors to any near neighbor who complains of PM 2.5 pollution from their neighbor's residential wood burning. I am also in the process of getting technical assistance from the federal government to write grants for a pilot project of health department enforcement of a law to shut down any residential wood stove that emits more PM 2.5 than EPA safe limits, using Purple Air PM 2.5 monitoring at the fence line, which would be near neighbor yards. 15. While asking neighbors to consider the actions they take that harm the health of near neighbors, encourage more compassion and create better relationships between former strangers who have the potential to become good neighbors to each other? Or do such conversations burden neighbors who then feel forced to become better people than they want to be? Over the past 3 years, I've learned that some, seemingly normal, people who I worked with deliberately didn't wear masks in the workplace even after my requests that they do so, as mandated at the time. Why would people deliberately threaten other people with deadly illness when they had been mandated by health authorities to simply wear masks? This COVID-era experience made me deeply question my faith in basic human nature for the first time in my life. I now question the morality of people who threaten my life by their individual actions. I see that it is not over-dramatizing to ask that people respect my right to breathe clean air, because there are reasons that people tell themselves to ignore the rights of others. Their reasons for harming others are often absurd and malicious at the same time. If they have absurd reasons, then I can reason them out of believing absurd things. If they are malicious, I can work to impose mandates on them to comply with laws which make them stop, or never start to, burn wood residentially, laws which I hope to help pass soon. Rosep View analysis follows using excerpts from the Climate News article below. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates argue that it is better not to burn fossil fuels and coal in the first place, instead of using carbon capture, which is expensive and has no track record of working. However, if carbon capture doesn't work, industries may be indirectly forced, after they find they cannot lower emissions with carbon capture, to turn to wind, solar and geothermal, although that turn to alternatives is not directly mandated in these new administrative rules. 1. Please comment, and bring up the idea that those same new rules should apply to biomass, wood-burning, plants. Please bring up the idea that burning wood is no different in fundamental ways than burning fossil fuels, and burning wood produces more CO2 and PM2.5 particulates than coal burning, for instance. Some environmentalists said that they will be pushing EPA to strengthen the standards during the 60-day public comment period that will begin as soon as the rules are published in the Federal Register. The EPA has asked for public comment on how to meet its obligation to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from smaller or intermittent running facilities. But for the larger plants, many environmentalists agree that power plant standards to control greenhouse gas emissions, which EPA determined were a threat to human health and the environment in 2009, are long overdue. It will be up to the plants to determine how to comply with these emissions limits, but the option of doing nothing is no longer viable. 2. The U.S. Supreme Court has some influence. President Barack Obama's previous effort to control power plant emissions, the Clean Power Plan, was stayed by the Supreme Court in 2016. Since then, it's been a long walk back to the drawing board. The Biden administration is dealing with a Supreme Court dominated by Republican-appointed justices who favor limiting the historical role of regulatory agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency. Biden's plan seeks to provide flexibility, but only within the fence line of each individual power plant, as the Supreme Court signaled was necessary to pass legal muster. Currently, the proposal only covers large natural gas plants that run more than 50% of the time. That means the smaller plants, which account for 75% of natural gas emissions in the power sector, face no new requirements. Many experts and advocates say the rules are unlikely to lead to widespread use of carbon capture on the nation's coal plants. Most are already expected to close by 2040. And only plants staying open beyond that year would be required to install CCS. 3. West Virginia and a carbon capture case. In 2022's West Virginia case, carbon capture, to be effective as a control system, must be attached to a pipeline and ultimately to a sequestration site, both of which are well outside the fence line. West Virginia, which relies on coal for more than 90% of its electricity, has already signaled it will launch a legal challenge against any new climate rules for power plants. EPA may have its work cut for it in front of an increasingly skeptical judiciary. 4. Carbon capture and clean hydrogen are the technologies of interest. Cleanup of the electricity sector will rely on two technologies: 4A, carbon capture and storage, or CCS, and 4B, clean hydrogen, that are receiving billions of dollars of federal subsidies approved by Congress over the past 2 years. Without carbon-free power, it won't be possible to cut greenhouse gas pollution from vehicles, buildings, or industry. The Biden EPA produced a highly customized set of rules to give the power industry both time and options for cutting their greenhouse gas emissions. Large categories of coal and natural gas power plants, those that are going to close soon, or are small, or only run intermittently, will not face new requirements at all. No fossil fuel plant will be forced to install those technologies before 2030. Large natural gas plants have until 2035 or 2038 to equip themselves with carbon capture and other technology to cut emissions 90%. That suggests the U.S. won't make it to Biden's goal of 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035 on this rule alone, even if it survives all of the challenges that the industry and states are preparing to launch. The rule would help drive an 82% reduction in greenhouse gas levels from the power sector by 2040 from their 2005 peak. But that analysis concludes the rule is a major step toward the U.S. meeting its goal under the Paris Agreement of cutting economy-wide carbon emissions 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. The new rule is just one component of a suite of policies, including the unprecedented $370 billion federal investment in clean energy from last year's Inflation Reduction Act, that together will drive the U.S. to a net-zero carbon economy. Power plants account for 25% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, making them second to vehicles as a carbon polluter. Cleaning up power plants will enable carbon reduction in the transportation sector through electric vehicles, and in homes and businesses through electric appliances. Jay Duffy, litigation director at the Clean Air Task Force, argued that the reliance on carbon capture is well positioned to withstand legal challenges. 5. Cost of wind and solar lower than ever before. The Biden administration is well positioned because of the precipitous drop in renewable energy prices and the billions in dollars of federal support for deployment of CCS and clean hydrogen technologies. Cost remains a serious hurdle. In a recent report, the Energy Department estimated a wide range of costs for capturing carbon emissions from gas power plants and determined that even the cheapest remain unprofitable, despite newly expanded tax credits that provide $85 per ton of carbon dioxide captured and stored. Putting carbon capture on coal plants is cheaper, but only slightly so. 6. Carbon capture and a Wyoming case. Carbon capture remains expensive and hasn't worked. Coal companies will simply have to close, and that may actually be the Biden administration's aim. CCS has had a tumultuous history. Efforts to equip power plants in the United States with the technology to capture emissions from plant smokestacks have failed. Currently, there are just 2 commercial-scale power plants operating in the world equipped with CCS, one in Canada and one in China, according to the Global CCS Institute. Wyoming has been trying to compel utilities to install carbon capture equipment on some of their coal plants in Wyoming, driven by a law enacted in 2020. So far, the utilities have balked, telling regulators that carbon capture technology remains too expensive. https://insideclimatenews.org/news/1105203/Biden-power-plant-plan-climate. Biden Power Plant Plan gives industry time options for cutting climate pollution. The long-awaited proposed rules, which rely heavily on carbon capture and hydrogen, are only part of the policy needed to get the U.S. to 100% clean electricity. Inside Climate News. May 11, 2023. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. But fossil fuel industry allies in both Congress and the states are ready to push back, saying the technology is not ready. United States. Rozep view, projects and policies labeled renewable or carbon neutral may receive funds, and organizations such as Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates may have to fight the government giving money to greenwashing projects that perpetuate biomass, wood, burning. 1. In early April 2023, the Environmental Protection Agency announced that it is spending $177 million to create 17 technical assistance centers around the country. Those centers aim to help community organizations apply for environmental justice funding made available under both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The IRA, which passed last year, dedicates some $60 billion in federal spending to advance efforts to reduce the nation's persistent health and economic disparities, though some estimates place that number closer to $47 billion. President Joe Biden's Justice 40 initiative also directs federal agencies to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of their environmental and energy investments to disadvantaged communities, including from federal infrastructure funds. It's a historic amount of money, but activists worry it could fail to reach the most vulnerable communities without better training on how to access it. 2. One survey found that 75% of Black-led organizations received funding from foundations in 2021, compared to 86% of white-led groups. Another report found that between 70 to 80% of philanthropic funding goes to organizations run by men, even though climate justice work is now largely led by women of color. 3. The new centers could also free up some capacity for environmental justice organizations, many of which now face double the workload as they continue to fight projects and policies that they believe will harm their communities, while also applying for the massive amount of federal funding now available to them. 4. The $177 million from the EPA will be split between 17 universities and environmental nonprofits, including the University of Minnesota, New Mexico State University, Deep South Center for Environmental Justice and West Harlem Environmental Action, more commonly known as We Act for Environmental Justice. Each group will partner with the Department of Energy and receive at least $10 million to build their capacity as training centers. 5. The communications director for We Act said his organization will use its funding to raise awareness of federal grant opportunities and provide technical assistance for community groups on things like grant writing, fundraising, and conducting research. 6. Obtaining a federal grant can be difficult. Some grant applications run upwards of 100 pages long and are riddled with obscure jargon. Applicants are often required to provide detailed data that can only be acquired by conducting a study or survey. And federal agencies, according to Lopez Nunez, often prioritize applicants who previously received government grants, giving a leg up to legacy institutions that already have ample resources and frequently get an outsized amount of funding from the government and philanthropies. https://insideclimatenews.org/news/1804203/EPA-environmental-justice-technical-assistance centers. The EPA's new technical assistance centers are a big deal for environmental justice. Here's why. Federal funding for environmental justice is at a historic high, but tapping it means navigating complex grant applications. New community-focused training centers aim to help. April 18, 2023. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Regan testifies before the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee regarding 2024 budget proposals on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., on March 22, 2023. So often, federal grants end up in the hands of universities that might not be directly working with our communities, or big mainstream organizations that only end up giving crumbs to the environmental justice communities that they're partnering with, Ms. Lopez Nunez, a veteran activist and deputy director of Ironbound Community Corporation, said in an interview. The Biden administration is doing something to help smaller grassroots groups like hers better navigate the complexities of the federal grant-making process. Lopez Nunez sits on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and said grassroots organizations need that kind of help to compete with bigger, better-resourced institutions for funding. Just last year, her organization applied for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Environmental Literacy Grant for the third time, only to get rejected during the final rounds of the selection process. "I never got it. I've been in the 99th percentile 3 times," she said. "And we've been around for 54 years. It's not like we're a new grassroots group that just started." Robert Bullard, a member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, told me in an interview earlier this year. "The challenge is not to let this opportunity pass us up, because we may never get it again." Alaska, Seward. Burning treated wood pallets releases toxins, the Cordova Times. The Cordova Times. While some pallets constructed from untreated wood can be safely burned, many pallets are treated with pesticides, fumigants, or chemicals to prevent. California, Laguna Beach. Razep View. This opinion writer want to continue to pollute beaches with PM 2.5 from wood-burning fires, but understands that wood-burning fireplaces in new construction have been banned. The author dismisses any concern the fire department has to fire pits causing wildfires. The author dismisses any concerns that other potential beachgoers, and the near neighbors of beaches have about PM 2.5 pollution from wood-burning fire pits. He thinks air pollution problems are solved by switching to charcoal fire pits, as if charcoal does also pollute the air. He says that fire pits are a tradition, which they are not. He thinks looking at flames and hearing crackling sounds is hypnotic, whereas it is simply pedestrian at best and creepy at worst. He doesn't think people will go to the beach at night without lighting a wood fire, because of the cold. Wearing pants, a shirt and shoes in Southern California might keep him from being cold. No shirt, no shoes, no beach service. Counting the fire pits, and the ensuing pollution on Southern California beaches, is also a little creepy. The pollution awaiting them on the beaches must discourage tourists. Guest opinion: Save our fire pits. Laguna Beach Local News. Laguna Beach Independent Newspaper. I get that wood-burning fireplaces in new construction have been banned. A few wealthy beachfront homeowners in Newport complained about smoke. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. This opinion piece is accompanied by a photo of the writer in a car in the desert. We have one shot at reclaiming Aliso Beach fire pits this Tuesday at City Council. We need you to show up, or call in, and voice your support for wood-burning fire rings, just as we've enjoyed over countless generations. The fire department would rather do away with them, citing fire safety and the fear that some rogue windstorm will send a spark across Coast Highway and into a hillside home. But banning open fire pits by the ocean? It came about after a few wealthy beachfront homeowners in Newport complained about smoke. Those nearby fire pits were switched to charcoal only, and the rest stayed put. Problem solved. So, for those of you keeping score at home, Orange County currently has 838 public fire rings. From north to south: Bolsa Chica 176, Huntington Beach 357, Newport Beach 63, Dana Point 44, Capistrano Beach 4, San Clemente 194, but Little Laguna Beach, zilch. South Dakota: Frederick family rebuilds after losing home, pets in fire. Dakota News Now. Dakota News Now. It was the wood-burning stove in the back bedroom that most likely caused the fire, according to Lacey. What the fire marshal said was because it. Frederick, South Dakota. Dakota News Now. A family of 8 that once aspired to open an animal sanctuary is starting from scratch after their home burnt down. On the afternoon of April 21st, the couple drove straight through their gates to their yard when they saw the smoke coming from their home. The woman of the couple said she checked that wood-burning stove before they left for Ellendale. It felt cool to her touch. Luckily, all 6 of children were out of the house. In the fire, they lost 3 dogs, 2 cats, a litter of kittens, a parakeet, rabbits, chickens, ducks, and turkeys. Canada, Alberta. Canada PM Trudeau heads for Alberta as wildfires rage. Reuters. Smoke rises from the Pasqua wildfire, HLW 030, as it burns near the Wood Buffalo. By Sunday afternoon, 89 fires were burning across Alberta. Bangladesh. Rozep view: in developed countries, do we want to indulge recreation indoor wood burning at the expense of health of near neighbors? In allowing the developed world's hobby of indoor residential wood burning emissions, are we foolishly aping the conditions of refugees and homeless encampments? Excerpts from the National Geographic article referring to wood burning follow. In 2018, Marjan, 35, and her son Muhammad, 2, were suffering from acute respiratory infections due to inhaled wood smoke. When the camps first opened, the surrounding forest was the only source of fuel. In the subdistricts of Ukia and Teknaf, more than 3,200 hectares of nature reserve were lost in the first year alone, due to the construction of refugee camps, and the Rohingyas need to collect wood to use as fuel for cooking the little food available, inside often overcrowded shelters. While exploring the camp, I came across a funeral. The deceased had died due to complications arising from a respiratory infection contracted through exposure to smoke produced by burning wood during food preparation. The man, who couldn't walk, was forced to stay inside the shelter while food was being cooked and had become ill. The infirm, the elderly, infants, and the women who did the cooking were the most exposed to the wood smoke. It was awe-inspiring at dawn, not only to see the camp covered in a blanket of smoke coming out of thousands of shelters, but also to witness the thousands of men, women, and children heading out to what was once a lush forest to collect wood from as far as 20 kilometers away. During the early months of the migration, the population depended on the Teknaf Nature Reserve for survival. A UN study estimated that more than 7,000 tons of wood were being collected daily. One significant achievement has been the shift to LPG, liquid petroleum gas, for energy needs. Refugees no longer have to venture into the forest to collect wood, which has helped preserve what's left of the reserve. The Rohingya Camps of Despair, Geographical Magazine. Geographical Magazine. The deceased had died due to complications arising from a respiratory infection contracted through exposure to smoke produced by burning wood during. The Rohingya Camps of Despair. May 15, 2023. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. Abdul Salam, 62, photographed in 2018 inside a hole that he had excavated to build a latrine in Kutupalong Balukali refugee camp. Dispossessed Rohingya refugees are living in vast, sprawling, underfunded camps in Bangladesh. What does the future hold for them? In August 2017, as many as 700,000 Rohingya fled Myanmar to Bangladesh to escape what the UN has defined as genocide. Today, the vast majority are still there, most living in the world's largest refugee camp. While conditions in what has become a cluster of camps have, in some ways, significantly improved in the past 5 years, they're still dire. Many of the refugees are malnourished, violent gangs rob and loot their few meager possessions, fires sweep through the flimsy buildings, and the political chaos across the Naf River in Myanmar offers little prospect for them to return home. In March, the UN World Food Programme, WFP, announced that it was cutting the financial assistance paid to those sheltering in the sprawling complex of camps near Cox's Bazar because of a lack of funding. The monthly ration that families can spend in the 40 WFP food outlets in the camps was cut from $12 to $10. The man was referring to the tens of thousands of children who have grown up in the camps, in conditions denying human dignity, with no real education and no prospects for the future. Another man, a father of 3 children, one of whom was a victim of a huge fire that devastated hundreds of shelters in February 2022, told me, "I don't care what will happen to me personally, I keep going for my remaining children. Even if I see no prospects of a decent life in front of them, that is my only concern." India, Bangalore. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, Bangalore Mirror. Bangalore Mirror. Environment researchers and experts say fly ash is a major air pollutant in the environment and contributes to particulate matter, PM2.5 and PM2.5 and health effects. Wood burning emits 90% PM2.5. PM2.5 and lung cancer, promotion or predilection? American Council on Science and Health. In a related Chinese toxicology study, pulmonary injuries and lung cancer progression were observed in mice exposed to 170 μg/m3 PM2.5 for 6 hours. LNI proposes wildfire smoke rules to protect outdoor workers. The Stand. The Stand. Particles of dangerous material, known as PM2.5, is 69 or higher. MAP is a good source for employers to track the nowcast AQI for PM2.5. Why would heaters suck? Hashtag particulate matter pollution breaking latest news. Breaking latest.news. Wood heating air conditioning killer particulate matter Jonas alert unsplash. The Federal Environment Agency, UBA, is sounding the alarm. The United States. Massachusetts, Lynn. Massachusetts brush fire still burning near Lynn neighborhoods, WCVB-TV. WCVB-TV. Firefighters are still working to extinguish a large brush fire that started Friday afternoon inside part of the Lynn Woods Reservation in Canada, Alberta, Lethbridge. The latest on wildfires and evacuation orders in Alberta, May 13, 4 p.m. Lethbridge News Now. No outdoor burning is permitted. Existing fire permits will be cancelled. No new fire permits will be issued until total fire ban is lifted. No wood. Canada, Ontario, Ottawa. Burn ban in effect for Ottawa, CTV News. CTV News Ottawa. All open-air fires, including campfires and wood-burning outdoor fireplaces, are now prohibited in the City of Ottawa, as a burn ban is in effect.